everyone. My name is Julie, and I'm the Partner Success and Program Associate at Plug and Play Vienna. I'm responsible for organizing our program, our events, and I'm actually the contact person for our batch startups and also our corporates here in Vienna. For you who don't know me, I'm very happy to also connect with you in case you're interested in our two verticals. We are focused on travel and hospitality and smart cities here in Vienna. And we also have a lot of partners from the aviation space, as well as real estate, insurance, and so on. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Wolfgang, Saskia, and Cassandra from weGrow. They are here today to deliver the workshop about international expansion and on the topic of setting the stage for expansion in Europe. So over to you, Wolfgang, and enjoy. And just a couple of more administrative points. So in case you have any questions in the meantime, you can always raise your hand. We will unmute you and you can ask your question directly, or you can also send a question in the Q&A box, and we will have a time for Q&A after the presentation. Thank you so much, and over to you, Wolfgang.
Thank you, Julie, for the introduction. Super happy to be here today and share a bit of our knowledge, of our experience of international expansion. My name is Wolfgang Langeder, Senior Expansion Consultant at weGrow. We're an expansion consultancy based here in Amsterdam. And today I brought my colleague Saskia.
Hi everybody, my name is Saskia. I'm within weGrow, responsible for all talent-related topics.
Let's dive straight into it. Today we want to talk about setting the stage for EU expansion, and to do a bit of a warm-up exercise. This we can skip. I think we got the introduction. To do a warm-up exercise, we do the old classic two truths analyze. So we're going to play a game with you. I'm going to tell you 3 stories about companies that expanded internationally, and 2 of them are true. 1 of them is a lie. And at the end, we're going to host a poll and you're going to vote on the one which is a lie. So listen in. Story number 1, the students selling to CEOs. The story is about a Dutch company, very large by now e-commerce company, market leader here in the Netherlands. And everyone in the Netherlands is basically on a first-hand basis. So they said, let's use students, let's use junior employees to sell to MT members, to CEOs. And in the Netherlands, this worked just great for them. So at some point they said, let's expand to the German market and do exactly the same. So they had students taking the phone, calling CEOs of large corporates. And what do you think happened? Exactly nothing. They didn't sell anything. Story number 2, the company that forgot to hire a country manager. So here we're talking about a quite sizable American software as a service company. They wanted to expand to Europe, and as a launching pad, so as a first market to enter, they wanted to go to Germany, and they had it all planned out. They had a perfect go-to-market strategy step by step, and they said, okay, in 2 months, we're going to launch Germany. But we have to find a country manager still, but we're gonna have that in no time. 2 months passed, they didn't have a country manager. 4 months passed, 6 months. After 9 months, they finally had a country manager onboarded, but it was obviously way too late. They lost a lot of money because they could start business way later than expected, and it was not the best solution for them. Story number 3, the company that sold lunch to people where they don't eat lunch. So we're talking about a Danish company. They specialized in providing warm lunch to companies that don't have a kitchen themselves or don't have a canteen themselves. And they said, well, we are super successful in Denmark. Let's go to a similar market. And they looked at the Netherlands. They thought, well, the Netherlands, they also have canals. They also have bad weather. So let's just go there. And then they realized after a couple of weeks in the market, shit, they don't eat warm lunch here. So they went into the market and realized it just doesn't work for them there. So we have the 3 stories, all of them a big fail. And now the question to you, which of the stories is actually made up? And I'd like Julie to host the poll. I think it's visible to everyone, and we're asking you to vote on the one story that is made up. Everybody has 15 seconds. Five more seconds. And I think we're all ready. Do we know how many people voted for yes? We can see the results. So 38% said students selling to CEOs, completely made up. Then also 38% forgot to hire a country manager, and only 25% said the story with the lunch is made up. Let's see which one it was. It was the second one. So this one did not happen. The first one actually happened. In this case, the main takeaway is know the business culture of the market that you're entering. And business culture, it's not only about hierarchy, as we saw it in this example. It can be about a lot of dimensions. Communication, for example, is a huge one. As an example, if you are going to the French market, they tend to use a lot of context and also a lot of storytelling in their marketing material, in their sales material. Sales cycles last a bit longer because of that. And then you have other markets like the Netherlands or also the northern part of Germany, where communication is just way more direct. The second one, hire a country manager, that is the one that was made up, but we see that actually a lot with our clients in going into new markets, that they tend to forget about that. Everybody's looking at the market where you sell your products, but not so much at the market where you actually get your talent from. So knowing the labor market is a huge one. And this one can happen because American software as a sales companies, they are used to notice periods of sometimes 2 weeks. And if you go to a German market, notice periods can be 2 months all the way up to 5 or 6 months, depending on the seniority. So really important one because that can screw your expansion quite a bit. The last one, selling lunch to people where don't eat lunch, really happened. And in this case, the company just didn't do their homework at all. They blindly went into the market, assuming that the product will be used the same way as in the home market, which is rarely the case. Why am I telling you this? Because we here at weGrow, we are on a mission to positively impact 100,001 founder. And we do this with strategy consulting, recruitment support, also fundraising support. And we did it by now with over 200 client projects rolling out into new markets. Why are we doing this? I think you're all familiar with the Valley of Death, which is basically when you found a company, it's super tough. Not a lot of companies make it out alive, but we actually identified a second one. The second Valley of Death is when you go internationally, the risk of failure is extremely high. There is about a 0.4% chance that you make it. And our goal is really to increase that number and bridge the second Valley of Death. We also call it the fuck up zone. Quick look into our team, but a couple of clients don't want to talk too much about that because today it's more about you and what you can get out of this. So we will need you to have your phone next to you. I hope that's the case for most of you, for all of you. And I'm asking you to type into your browser slido.com. and then you will be asked to enter a number, and then ideally you enter the number 210119, because we want to ask you from which countries you actually are today, so that we have a bit of an overview. We have Sweden, we have Italy, yes. Hungary, United States, Switzerland. It's already quite colorful there. Germany, UK, Spain, a couple of them in Austria, seems to be the majority. Even Singapore is here, Czech Republic. Also many Hungarians. Netherlands we have here. Yes, I think we have all of them. Super broad. That is always something that excites me and also excites Saskia, that we have a really colorful round. Even Australia just joined. Welcome also Australia, super happy. So this is one part, and now going more towards internationalization. There is a second question, and I think if you look at your screen again, there should pop up the next question. And this is, what are you most worried about in your expansion journey? So what is most critical for you? Is it that you don't find the right market? Is it not knowing how to enter a market? Is it not finding the right people? Is it not sure how to doing sales there? Could be anything. What is it for you? And that one maybe needs a bit more thinking than the country. Choosing a market wisely. Yes, market selection, definitely. Reaching the right people. Cost and adopting to culture, how to get traction. So many different markets and regulations in the EU. Yes, definitely. The lack of traction when entering a new market, get the right ambassadors in the country. Local rules and regulations, finding right messages and channels. Yes, that's usually a big one. So market dynamics, ways of doing business. What I read so far condensed is a lot about what is actually the market I should enter based on my business. Time to revenue, yes. So what is, how long can I afford to work on a market? Because there's also a lot of costs included. Then what we also saw, cultural differences, definitely. Regulatory differences. So it's super diverse. Thank you for putting that all in the chat. That helps us a little bit steer the conversation today. We will not have the chance to dive into all these topics. They keep popping up and popping up. Managing and finding the right people. I think that one is really key. And for that, also super happy to have Saskia in the call today. We're trying to cover as many of them as possible. Promise, not sure if we manage to do all of them. At the very end of the session, we are going to ask you for your key takeaways. So you will be asked to put them in the chat. So keep listening in actively. Thanks a lot for now. And now we're going into the content. Expectations versus reality. So what we hear a lot when companies are going international, they're saying, well, we're quite successful in the home market. So basically what we're doing, we're going to take what we have and we're going to do it the same way in a new market, because that proved to be working. But in real life, there is ups and downs, there is left and right, there is so many unknown unknowns, there is known unknowns, there's everything on the market. And our aim is to provide you with a little bit of structure towards that journey. And the first big one is always to check, are you actually ready to expand? Is this the right time for you? Do you have the headspace to do that? Do you have the resources to do that? And if not, how do you get to the right resources? Then you want to know to which markets should we head out to? Where do we have the best fit to our business? Not necessarily the biggest market, but the market where you have the biggest product market fit. Then market validation. So this is a lot of research in the market and then actually testing the market, talking to people in the market and seeing if there is an actual need for your product. Step 4, planning. So how can you roll out the market? Step 5 is actually doing it, launching the market and navigating through that very busy time. And step number 6 is super important for your entire expansion, is collecting all the learnings and building a process that is replicable so that you can roll out market after market after market. And this all backed by a fundraising track. So you need to probably need to continuously add money to your expansion. And also, and that's really key, add the right talent. That's a bit of a high level strategy. So the first big question is really where to go. And finding the right markets is not easy. There is different views to that. You might be attracted to a big market if you go to Europe. Obviously, you have France in mind, you have Germany in mind, but you don't have to go for the big market. So there's also strategies where you could say, let's think about sequence and let's first do a small market as a learning market. And what usually works quite well is also the Netherlands as a learning market, because the Dutch are quite direct and frank with feedback, and you will also hear that from the consumers. So if you go into the market and something is not wrong, is not right, they will let you know immediately. And then you could use this a bit smaller market to prepare yourself, get the basics right, and then put all the focus on a bigger market like Germany, like France. But there is also arguments why you could do it totally the other way around and say, let's take all our power or our focus and go to Germany and use it as a lighthouse market. There's always a good argument saying, hey, we are successful in Germany. Let's also go to Switzerland, for example. And then it's easier to find clients there because it's easier to build trust with them if you already conquered a bigger market. For where to go, research is a really important one. Do the homework, as we heard it with the example of the company selling warm lunch to the Dutch people. This can really save you. It will save you. So good to invest time and money on this one. Also check feasibility. So can you actually enter a huge market? It will take a lot of money. It will take a lot of time, also a lot of headspace. So the question is it really the right market for you? And the last one is competition. Competition can be seen as a good thing, but also as a bad thing. If there is a lot of competition, the market is obviously saturated. If there is no competition at all, also be careful. It could mean that the product just doesn't work that well in this market. So it can be a bit of a red flag for you to avoid it. The second big question after you have chosen the right market is how to actually enter the market. And there is 1,000 of different ways to enter the market. Luckily, we have one recipe that makes it a lot easier for you. That is 100 kilograms country manager, 2 eggs, half funding, 6 cups of translators, a bit of salt and pepper, voila, you're successful in the market. Unfortunately, obviously, this recipe does not exist. At least we have not found it. What we can do today is we give you a couple of guiding principles that you can use when expanding into a new market. And it really helps to start with a goal in mind. If you don't know where you're heading, if you don't know when you're successful, you're going to have a lot of left and rights and a lot of energy that's just going nowhere. So as an example, some of you might be familiar with the OGSMs, objectives, goals, strategy, and measures. Super easy one. Define for yourself what you actually want to achieve in the market, and that can be different. You can say, I want to be market leader. You can say, I want to just prove that I can do business abroad. Maybe you needed to get additional funding. And once you have that clarified, you can attach goals to it. Say, hey, I want to get 50 clients within the first year, as we have it here in the example. And if the goal is set, then it starts with the creative part, talking about how to get there. In our example, it will be winning a lighthouse customer, and with that attracting customers with some kind of a domino effect. That's your strategy. Obviously, that needs to be a bit fine-tuned in real life, but then you can start putting measures behind it and say, okay, how do we get this lighthouse customer? We need to map all the customers, decide which one can be a lighthouse customer, win them, and create a case so that you can showcase that for future clients. Some other guiding principles, and we see this reoccurring really, it's focus, focus, focus. Starting a new market, expanding into a new market, very often feels like starting a new company. So especially if you're founder of a company, this can easily pull you in quite a lot. And then it's important that you don't spread yourself too thin, that you say, okay, this is really crucial. This is where I put my focus, and that's it. Another one for entering market is beachhead strategy. And that's especially useful if you're targeting a big market. So maybe you don't need to enter the full market at once, but you can carve out little pieces so that you say, I'm going to start with a region or with a certain demographic group or with a certain city. And then you work your way step by step into the market. And the third one is, we call it the bowling alley. You aim at one pin, and this pin is so powerful and has influence on other ones that they fall as well. So this would be the example of getting a lighthouse customer. And if you have that on board, it's easier to get other customers as well. How can you de-risk your expansion if you go into a market? A lot of money goes into the market. So how can you prevent a market from failure? We recommend to really test your markets and split your market entry into different phases. So if you look at this chart, you have two axes. You have the risk and the investment. And in the beginning, when you enter a market, you don't know a lot. So your risk is rather high that something could go wrong. So what you want to do in the beginning is maybe create only a very lean version of your product, maybe only a feature of your product or one product out of your portfolio, and put it in a new market, get some feedback, get some validation, and then work your way phase by phase, step by step forward, and keep adding things, keep adding money in the market. And this way you could also test multiple markets at the same time without overcommitting yourself to putting in way too much money. And then there is knowing the target culture. And this is a really important one. I mentioned it as the first case. So that was the students selling to the CEOs, where they completely forgot about hierarchy. You will find culture in every aspect of business. It's when you do sales, it's when you do marketing, it's how you translate your product, how you adjust, localize your product, because things are different in the countries, especially Europe is a very, I would say, yeah, colorful area with people acting differently, speaking differently. So what does it mean for you? You need to have localized websites. So only in a few cases, it's enough to not do that. But most cases, localize it. Also look at how people actually pay for your product. So for some markets, they are very cash heavy still. Germany is a great example. Seems like a very advanced country, but people are still paying a lot in cash. The Netherlands, on the other hand, would be a very digitalized payment country where, yeah, it's almost impossible to pay something in cash there. Sales material, you need to adjust that one. The way you pitch, the time that you budget to your sales cycles. For example, if you sell in the rather northern part of Germany, sales cycles tend to be rather short. If you sell the same product in France, sales cycles last quite long. So this is something that you need to be aware of and also plan in with your goal setting. And at the same time with hiring your team, as we had in the example, for some markets, you just need more senior people in order to make progress into your sales there. We have one really good recommendation for you. It's a book by Erin Meyer called The Culture Map. Many of you probably already saw it. It's quite present in some bestseller lists. You also see it at the airports, and it really gives a good indication of how different cultures work, why they work that way, and how you can apply this in your business context and in moving into a new market. So a really, really high recommendation there. And then the question is, obviously, now we heard about so many different elements that go into a go-to-market. How can you bring that all together? And we're going to share this also afterwards with you. We created a tool called Expansion Canvas, and it actually brings together all these elements. So it starts with collecting all the insights of a market. Then you go into the draft phase with mapping out the goal. What is your approach? Which stakeholders to include? You go all the way to the heart of it. So you craft a commercial strategy for the new market, which is backed by your operational setup. And once you have that, once that is validated, you go into the planning phase and say, okay, now let's put it into a timeline, map out all the risks and opportunities behind it, and put it into an action list with clear ownership so that everybody in the company knows what to do to execute on the strategy. So we will share this one with you. But before we go too much into action mode, I want to hand it over to Saskia, and she will tell you all the ins and outs about the organizational setup and talents.
Thanks, Wolfgang. Thank you very much. Yes, I'll dive into a little bit deeper in what do you actually need to do from an organizational point of view to make sure that you're ready to scale. So first of all, who in your organization is responsible for the expansion, the internationalization? So you have to ask yourself two questions. First of all, who is running who is setting up your market, and who is running your market? So first of all, the decision, who will be setting this up? Is this something that you, and this is something we always advise, but place in your senior management? If we could go to the next slide. In your senior management, this would be either in your founding team or in your management team, somebody who knows the business inside out, who knows everything about your product market fit, your strategy, to assign other resources to it, have somebody responsible who will also take care of this internationalization, because it takes a lot of time. It always takes double the time, double the budget than you expected. So it's always a bit of a rough ride. Make somebody responsible for it and give it a priority. Another thing that you can do is internally appoint a launcher team or hire a launcher team. This is a team, especially with larger scale companies that are expanding to multiple countries. This is a team that is responsible. They will be set up, setting up everything locally. They know your company inside out. They will go to the country and set it up for you. And then once it's operating, once you've entered, they will hand it over to local operations, for example. Another thing that you can do is perhaps a franchise. So just appoint somebody in a new country that will do it for you. You have less ownership, you have also less risk, and they will act as a launcher or as your company locally, knowing maybe not your company inside out, but knowing the market inside out. And the other thing that you could do is hire a local party. So for example, a large e-commerce company called Trusted Shops in Germany, they did this when expanding to the Netherlands. Instead of just bringing somebody there, they bought, they were first working with a sales agency that was doing sales on their behalf. And once they got traction and once they got going, they in the end ended up buying the sales agency, so merging it into their own company, and putting one of their employees as a country manager on top of it. So first, then you de-risk. There's not a lot of investment because it's just another company generating sales for you, but it also is not really your DNA or your culture. We're getting into that later on, because now you decided, okay, how am I going to set up a new market and who is going to be responsible? Then the second question would be on the next slide, who's running your new market? Here you also have multiple options. So one thing that you could do once it's set up, are you fully running the company from your HQ, from your headquarters? Will everything be done from there? So for example, this means you are an Austrian company, but you hire a Dutchie in Austria that from your office in Austria will run the Dutch market. Another part is, for example, with your Austrian company, you hire me as a Dutchie in the Netherlands. I will run around here crazy doing business for you and setting everything up, but I have the full support from your finance teams, your HR teams, your marketing, and operational support, which is all being done in HQ. Then you have another option, is a fully independent satellite office. This is something you see usually back when the culture is significantly different than your own. So for example, I worked for a company in trading in the Netherlands. They had an office in, they had 24 offices around the world, but this company had a specific satellite office in Japan, for the main reason that due to business culture, due to language, due to supply chain and logistic, it was just so completely different than how we are used to doing business here in the Netherlands or in Europe, that it made more sense to have everything being done there. So with a local GM, local finance, local payroll, local everything, fully satellite office. So like a mini HQ for another part of the world. Another option that you could do is option 4, where you run your market by freelancers. This is usually in a very early stage, an option where there's not a lot of investment involved. So you have somebody that is testing the waters for you on your behalf. You don't need to set up an entity yet. You are not forced or bound by any payroll or labor law restrictions. It's a good way to test, but of course very risky, because this person will represent your company in that local country, but they could also just walk out the door. So the risk goes multiple ways, but it is a very easygoing way to test the waters. And option 5, hire an agency to do it for you. Here, of course, you have larger contracts perhaps to keep them bound, but it's never your culture or never your DNA operating in that country. Then, so we've thought about, in your management team, we've thought about, okay, who's setting up my market, who's setting up the new market, who's running it. Then what do you actually need to pay attention to? There are a few things. First of all, culture. If your ambition is to scale internationally, make sure that you create the right international inclusive culture. If you are bound to really open up and go somewhere else, be open to new business cultures, different ways of doing business. It's indeed what we've seen, what Wolfgang just discussed. It's not a copy paste, not on your business model, but also not on your culture. There will be differences, and make sure that you're open to it. Differences in ways of working, for example, in Asia, people, like the Japan office I mentioned before, people don't go home until the general manager goes home. Here in the Netherlands, if my boss is still in the office, but I need to go, I just walk out because I have other things to do. That's our business culture. So, of course, we all, maybe our culture is work hard, play hard, but keep these things in mind, that it works differently wherever you are around the globe. Another part, and a mistake that it happens a lot within companies, is communication. Especially here in Europe, it's very scattered. We have different countries, different dialects, different languages for even the smallest area. which also means that it's not everything is done in English. I'm still surprised how many companies are set up in a local language and find it really difficult the moment they go international to change this. As a management team, make sure if you take the decision to go international, immediately change your language to the international language that you want to use. This also means if you're communicating via Slack, you're used to doing everything in Germany, but you're willing to go to the US, from that moment onwards, make sure all internal communication happens in English instead of German. Because it will make people feel more welcome. It's easier for potential customers to engage with the employees, and also with new employees to feel included and not being left out. Also, really important, who is responsible for what and what are your goals? I think in line with what Wolfgang said, make it measurable. If I have a new person setting up another country for me, what should this person do in the first 6 months to make sure that he or she is successful? And you can only become successful if you know where to score on, what your target is. Of course, goals are going to change, and especially in growing companies, these things change all the time. But make sure that you at least align on what your goal is, and then also new people can be successful. Also, enable your company to be ready for growth. If you start hiring people in another country, they are not going to be in your office all the time. Of course, now due to COVID, we are used to more remote working than ever before. Nevertheless, communication is one of the most important things to have in place. How does a person know where to reach out to, who to reach out to for help? So make sure you have the right communication channel, but also to measure or keep track of progress, a good CRM system, for example, for potential new clients, and make sure this also works in the country that you're aiming to go to. But most important of all, the right people. And this is a question that we get a lot, how to find these people, how do I know what is important? And who to hire. I think this is the most heard question I hear a lot. And there's only one rule that I really want to stand for that is important. If there is doubt in the process of making a first international hire, don't do it. This person will represent your company, your product, your brand into a new country. There is not maybe a lot of ambassadors yet. You only have one shot to make a good first impression. So make sure that the person that you hire lives and breathes everything that you set out for your company. How to test that, I'll get to how to find this person and what this person should do. But how to test that is really important. Spend time in this process. If this means you need to fly over to the country to meet with this potential candidate at a potential new client, do it. If it means that this person needs to stay over in your headquarters for 2 to 3 months to really learn everything, do it. Because this investment will return out into how successful you are entering a market. Then what to look for actually in a person. This is, I think, what is really a must if you hire somebody. First of all, define what type of role. Do you need a country manager? Do you need a country launcher? Do you need maybe more a head of sales? I think one of the biggest pitfalls that people do sometimes is hire too senior. Setting up a new country comes with a lot of operational tasks and responsibilities. So somebody can still be senior, but they need to have the drive to do things themselves, because there's not a very large support team locally to help you do it. You need to be the CEO and screw the desk together all in one person. So I think it would be, when hiring somebody, it would be really great if this person worked at a startup or a scale up before. Solely corporate experience and being a first person in a country, that gap is so big. It takes about at least 6 months to a year, or maybe 2 years for a person to adjust to this. Usually you don't have this type when opening up a new country. You need people to already be successful within 6 months. So here, hire somebody who worked at a startup or a scale up before. This will give you you will win a lot of time. Make sure somebody is super strong in communication. There's no room for assuming things when there's a light year of distance physically distance between the two of you. So make sure that somebody is super proactive, jumps on the phone, is not afraid to reach out, because if you don't reach out, people in the HQ will not know that you needed help. Being reliable, I think, is very important. You need to have this trust towards your future partners, but also trust from you as a management team to give all this responsibility to one person who's very far away. Strategic mindset, what we mean here is it's very easy to get lost in day-to-day business, to ad hoc questions. You need somebody who's senior enough to see the long-term goal, but not afraid to do everything that is necessary to get there. And yeah, I think what else is really important, sometimes people ask me, yes, I need somebody with already a very large experience in my industry. So coming from competitors or something else. This is not even a must. I think the networking skills are even more important. Will somebody be able to connect you with the right customers? Not be afraid to find them, reach out to them, and be at the table, because that's actually what you need, because you don't have that local network yet. I think that network is then even more important than actually coming from the same product or coming from the same experience. Make sure that you're aligned on values. And here is really key that the way you like to do business, the values you put in front of it, the values you have in doing business, make sure that they are 100% aligned. If there's doubt, don't do it. Then it seems like a super long list of what you need to look for, but actually from experience, and I've spoken to, I think I did more than 3,000 interviews already, from founder to first-time employees. The person and the candidate is out there. Then you just need to make sure you either understand the market very well, do research online, or hire an agency to do it for you. But the person is out there. It takes sometimes a little bit of time, so start in time. The moment you start thinking about your go-to-market strategy is the moment you need to start searching for the right candidate. To ensure, like what Wolfgang said, it sometimes you have 6 months notice periods in countries. So make sure the moment you start thinking about your go-to-market strategy, start thinking about your first hire or finding that person then in your own country or locally. Because also things that you need to start thinking then about immediately is, okay, how will I hire this person? Will it be a freelancer setup? Do I actually want to have an entity locally? Do I want to set up a payroll? Yes or no? And our advice always in this stage is, especially when entering a market, work with local agencies. Especially in Europe, the labor law differs per country so much, tax implications and so on. Always make sure that you have the right experts advising you entering a market from an employer perspective, instead of having somebody internally figuring it out for you, because the implications can be very big. So that's it from my side, Wolfgang. Yeah.
And we go, before we enter the territory of the Q&A, we're going to do a couple of conclusions from our side. And the most important one is know the product market fit when you go into a new market. And really, and there's a couple of tricks to this. Ask your clients in the existing market what they think of you, why they like you, why they don't like you, and then try to replicate that in the new market. Choose your next markets very wisely. Don't fall for the obvious candidates. Really question that for your business. It can help to invest in your first strategic customer. So take a bit more time for that. The same as Saskia said, you want to have the right person on board as your first employee. You also want to have the first right customer on board. Allow two times more time and also budget. It will always take longer and it will always consume more money than you think it will. Cultural differences, read up on it, go to the countries, make yourself familiar with how people do business, and then really apply that also for your market strategy, and surround yourself with experienced people in the market. Maybe you have them in your company already. Maybe you have some talent from the target market. Maybe you have some partners that you can leverage. They are out there. So what we want to do now is that we all take, I would say, about 2 minutes for reflection of what you just heard, all the content, and think, what are your most important key takeaways from that? And afterwards, after those 2 minutes, I would like you to actually share them in the Zoom chat here. And at the same time, you can also post questions in there already if you want to. So let's see if we already have some first takeaways. It's already late in the day, at least here in the European time zone. So our energy is maybe a bit maxed out already. If anyone has something to share already, please just put it in the chat box, and we can read it out here. So we hear from the first person. Thanks, Martin, for adding here. Focus is key, definitely. Learn and adapt immediately. Make headquarter aware that Europe is different than the US. I think that's a very good one. Yeah.
I think maybe to respond to that one, from experience, that can be challenging, and it can sometimes even take years for people to adjust to different cultures, different working styles, and different environments. And the other way around as well, for European companies going to the US, same thing. It's very important to make people aware of that.
Thanks, Olga. The expansion canvas seems quite insightful. So for this one, it's obviously for now a rather blank canvas, but it gives you a lot of trigger questions. So very right. And we're also going to share this one afterwards with you. Another key takeaway is getting in contact with experienced experts about the product you're bringing to the market. we really see this as key. It's right. It's quite easy to assume that your product is just going to work the same way in a new market as it does in the home market. But then actually talking to people, talking to the consumers, talking to experts in a market will give you a totally different picture and give you a lot of insights that you can use for any aspect of your rollout, really. So this one we cannot stress enough, and I think is one of the most valuable ones. It's normal to try and err during market expansion. Yes, this really depends on how often you can afford that, obviously, but a failing is also a good thing there. And what we think is even more important is take the learnings from there and share them with the entire team. Because if you expand into one market, you're probably going to expand into another market as well. So always good to take a bit of time on the side and reflect. So we're into a new market 2 months. Let's see what happened. Let's see what we did, what went well, what didn't go well, and apply it then for the new market.
This could save you a lot of time and money to not have the same mistakes in multiple countries. And it happens more often than we think. But reflection is super key there to win.
Value proposition can be very different in different countries. Yes, very much. To give you one example of a company that we know, they went from the Netherlands to Germany, and in the Netherlands, their winning factor is basically speed and the price. And with this, they designed all their communication. That's what they focused on. They also used this when they entered the German market, and then they realized, okay, we're not making a lot of progress there. And then they did validation in the market. They did research, talked to the potential consumers, and actually realized people over there, they don't value the speed as much or the price. They value quality. They value that it's reliable. So they changed that in the communication, and it actually worked out pretty well for them. Then we have a question, which cost is usually unexpectedly higher than planned? I would say almost any, and it comes from the fact that your expansion usually takes longer than expected. So you can plan to roll out into a market in 3 to 4 months, but you're dependent on quite a lot of parties. Maybe you have some partners, distribution, or marketing partners. You don't find the right people on time, but at the same time, you're already paying wages. You're paying salaries to people, and this will just increase the overall costs that it takes for you to arrive in the market, to be successful in the market.
Maybe to add from a talent perspective, not a very popular thing to talk about, but what if you make this misfit higher? Something that is always a lot higher, especially in some countries in Europe, is getting rid of people. Where perhaps in the US, we could just part ways within 2 weeks and we're done. Here, especially at senior director level or senior management level, it could differ per country, but it will cost you 1 to 3 years of year salaries in some cases. So this is a cost that is usually unexpectedly much higher, but you can tackle them by making sure that you hire the right person or choose a different setup to avoid paying 3-year salaries.
What we usually recommend, connected to the budget, is really define, okay, this is how much I have for the market, and then also plan it out a little bit over the year and add milestones so that you know if you're halfway the time in the market, you know what to do. There are so many cases where people go into a market, they're halfway in, they don't make any revenue really, but they already spent half the money that they have. And then there's a thing called sunk cost fallacy, which means that now they think, okay, we already spent half the budget. If we now pull out of the market, then this half is lost. But the reality is that if they keep spending in a market that just doesn't work for them, they also waste the other half of the money. And you don't realize once you're in the market, once you're running and spending. So it's really good to define this upfront and say, okay, by this day, this is what we need to have achieved. Otherwise, really red flag, and let's reassess if it actually makes sense to continue.
Any other questions or topics or remarks you'd like to dive deeper into?
I think that's it, I would assume. Then I would say if there is more questions popping up after this session, if you wake up wildly during the night thinking, I forgot to ask this or that, please reach out to us at any time via LinkedIn. You have our email addresses here, and the QR codes will lead you to the LinkedIn profile. And I see we have Julie back in the call. So thanks a lot again for having us, and I would like to hand it over to you again.
Thank you, Wolfgang, and thank you, Saskia, for such a nice presentation. And also thank you for your time, for also sharing your expertise with our startups. I hope you all enjoyed the session. In case you would like to deep dive into this topic, as Wolfgang and Saskia already offered, please don't hesitate to reach out to them or to me. We're more happy to help you out and to connect you. If you have any other kind of questions, would like to know more about the program here in Vienna, about our corporate partners, you're also more than welcome to connect with me. My email address is julie@pnptc.com, so super easy. Thank you for joining us today. And just for your information, we are organizing next workshop on the 19th of October. So that's next week on Tuesday, on PR and communications and what kind of tools are out there for you to help you to also market your business appropriately. So if you're interested in that, also reach out to me. Happy to forward the invite. Other than that, I wish you a very nice evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. And thanks a lot again. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.